folks, I'm Owl, this is Yarnell Reads, and today's video is the first video in Adventures with Owl. So I decided I was going to do this series of videos that is you coming along with me doing my everyday tasks. Today it's laundry and talking about stuff. These are just chat videos. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to go with it, but I know today's topic is going to be sexism and feminism in sci-fi. So the whole point of this is I actually need to keep doing my chores while I talk to you. So I've been thinking a lot lately about feminism and sexism in sci-fi because I've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately. That's just what I've been in the mood for. I recently read Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. That was my first 5-star of the year, and I've been talking about it constantly. Right after that, I read Whole Metal Girls by Emily Skrutsky, which was my second 5-star read of the year, and it started to make me think maybe the books are definitely also good, but it also started to make me think that maybe I just needed to be reading books that I was feeling like reading. And unbeknownst to me, I was apparently feeling like reading sci-fi. But the reason that that didn't immediately jump into my brain as like, ooh, I should be reading sci-fi right now, I think has something to do with the fact that I associate sci-fi with kind of shitty men and very poorly written women. So I've recently read Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, Whole Metal Girls, and All Systems Red by Martha Wells. All of these were fantastic, and I loved them, and I couldn't understand why I hadn't been reading sci-fi more. And then I started the S'more Sci-fi Book Club pick of the month. If you don't know what S'more Sci-fi Book Club is, it is a book club put together by Winks and Ink and the Marshmallow Commonwealth. Winks and Ink is a channel, I'll link her below. The Marshmallow Commonwealth is the podcast that she does with Adrian or Adriana. She introduces herself at the beginning of every podcast, and yet I still somehow can't remember her name. Regardless, I will link the Marshmallow Commonwealth's podcasts below as well. So every month they pick a old-fashioned sci-fi book, a classic sci-fi book, and they discuss it in 2 episodes on their podcast. So this month's pick is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. I hated Fahrenheit 451, I think because it was assigned reading, and I didn't do well with assigned reading. I don't like being told what to read. But I hated Fahrenheit 451, and then I loved his short stories. I loved the uniqueness that he would bring to the world building he would do. So I was thinking this was the perfect time for me to jump into the S'more Sci-fi Book Club. I've been wanting to be part of it for a little while, but I just haven't had time. I've had other things I wanted to read, and none of the titles for the last couple months have really jumped out at me. So this one, it was like, yes, this is it. I am going to read this. I'm going to listen to the podcast. I'm going to be part of this community. And so as soon as I finished All Systems Red, I jumped into Martian Chronicles. I'm listening to it on audiobook. The audiobook is good, but the content isn't necessarily. So the first note that I made on this book, when I'm listening to audiobooks, I tend to make notes on my phone when I have thoughts I want to put in a review or a video. And the first note I made for this one was, why do men write other men doing shitty things and women who have no dimension? And I think that this feels very much more like sci-fi than the other books I was reading. Because to me, sci-fi means men writing other men doing shitty things and being shitty people. And that's not all of what the Martian Chronicles is about. I am halfway through it right now. I am actually enjoying it. The premise of the Martian Chronicles is it's a bunch of stories told about Mars, but several months apart, and the stories are sort of connected. So people from Earth really want to visit Mars. They keep sending these different missions out to visit Mars, and each one is landing and succeeding in getting to Mars, but then something is happening to them. And we know, so it's told from the perspective of Mars and of Martians and of this huge culture and community that Mars is already populated in this book. And so that's been cool. Not necessarily, we're not following a single character or a single storyline. We're just sort of generally following. So I think that's also part of why I'm liking it, is it reminds me of his short stories. It's just a bunch of short stories that are sort of interrelated because they're all to do with Mars and Mars's interactions with people. human people. Martians are also people. I have been enjoying it in that sense. But it's just also making me realize that this is so different from the other books I was reading. And this is not something I would just automatically reach for as a pleasure read. It's interesting, but I certainly wouldn't call it a pleasure read. At least not for me. And a large part of that is because the men are almost all domineering, alpha male types. They are controlling, they're rude, and they're especially rude to the women. The first story in it, the first chronicle, is about a woman who has been having dreams about the people who are going to visit, the first set of humans that are going to visit Mars, and her husband gets jealous, and so he makes her stay home when she thinks they're going to land. He goes and kills them, and then he comes back and lies about it. And it's just so weird how just totally submissive she was to him, and how that was a good thing. Okay, I need to take some of these to the laundry room. 1 second, you're coming with me. So for my undergraduate thesis, I studied the scientific accuracy in a bunch of classic sci-fi novels. Well, not all classic. So I was looking at Dune, Jurassic Park, Jaws, The Wind-Up Girl, books like that. Michael Crichton was my hero growing up. I just wanted... Jurassic Park was my favorite story, and yeah, super important to me. A lot of that was because the movie was so good. It was the first movie I ever saw. I was 2, so I guess it's the first movie I ever remember seeing. But it was super feminist. Like, the girl main character, the one who was closest to my age, was a programmer and a hacker and really good with computers, which I related to. And the guy character wasn't a total ass. And yeah, like, there was a female scientist, and I really wanted to be a scientist, and a large part of that was because of this movie. So to me, I, put all of that on Michael Crichton. By the way, the book is not that cool. I wish the book was that cool. So yeah, I put all of that awesomeness onto Michael Crichton, which when I got older and did this study, I realized it wasn't really deserved. There are pretty much no women in Michael Crichton's, at least in the Michael Crichton books that I've read, that have their own agency? I don't know. I'm getting a little bit on a tangent here, but that's sort of the point of this, is that you get to listen to me ramble. So, The Martian Chronicles has the feeling that reminds me very much of this classic sci-fi. Sorry, you're bouncing a little, I'm on the bed. So far, there hasn't been a single female character that's, properly named. At least, the first female character isn't properly named. There's a chapter I just read, and it does have some female characters that are sort of named, but they're not named, because... Sorry, that was the cat. They're not named because they, as individuals, matter. They're named in how they relate to the men. So it's this man's mother, or this man's wife. And I know that was, the norm, that was regular when books like The Martian Chronicles were written. It just really bothers me, and it's making me realize that that's part of why I couldn't get into sci-fi as much when that was the norm, or into sci-fi books that were written when that was the norm. As much as I love Michael Crichton, I tried to read Andromeda Strain. I have lots of problems with that book, but a large part of it is because the only female characters in the entire book are referred to as the wives of the scientists. Adaptations have sort of tried to fix that. There are better adaptations of the Andromeda Strain, and one of these days I kind of want to watch it because I want to see the story done better. So, all of that coming to today, and when I've been describing to people the books that I've been reading, And at first I was describing it to them as these super feminist sci-fi books. And they sort of are, like, they are feminist in that they lack the sexism that is so prevalent in sci-fi and is, like, expected. It's sad that there's such a low bar for that. So I would say Long Way is straight up feminist. Like, there's lots of female characters, but is it though? Like, is it feminist just to have female characters who are not two-dimensional and who are treated well and have their own stories beyond just how they relate to the men? Like, what makes feminist sci-fi? Is it that they don't consider gender to be binary? Is it when they are intersectional with race and gender and all of that? Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is intersectional in that way. Like, gender is sort of discussed and isn't uniform, isn't just, like, assumed binary, nor are people assumed to be a single gender their whole lives. So in that way, maybe it's feminist. And then looking at Home Metal Girls, most of the main characters are women. It is also intersectional in that one of the main secondary characters is a trans lady, and it's, like, never made a big deal of. It's never actually outright said, which might have its own problems, honestly. Is that what makes a feminist sci-fi story? And then looking at All Systems Red, the main character isn't a woman, but also isn't really a man. Murderbot, the main character in the Murderbot Diaries, first book is All Systems Red, uses it pronouns. I prefer they, because I see Murderbot as slightly more than an it, but yeah, it's a little weird. I need to continue the series and see how Murderbot develops as a person, essentially. But that being said, there are female characters who aren't defined by the male characters in the story that have their own agency and are important in their own ways. So is that what makes it feminist? Is it feminist? I have lots of thoughts regarding this and no answers. So I would call Long Way feminist because in addition to just having female characters who aren't completely defined by the male characters in the story, it also has the elements of intersectionality. I think I would also call Whole Metal Girls feminist for the same reason. So, of the two narrative main characters, one of them is Muslim and Arrow Ace, and that made me happy because I am also Ace. And then another character is trans, and so in that way it's intersectional, and so in that way I would say Whole Metal Girls is a feminist story. A feminist sci-fi story. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on feminism and sexism in sci-fi, and this has been the first Adventures with Owl video. If you want to find me on other social media, I am on Twitter, Instagram, WordPress, and Goodreads, all under Yarn Owl Reads. If you have any questions or comments, you know where to leave them. I'll link all the books that I talked about in this video and all the channels I talked about in the description below. And other than that, I'll see y'all soon. Bye!